What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I want to rock you through the year in review of Keyforge. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You see, we've only actually had Keyforge since November 2018, which means we couldn't really do a year in review 2018 for Keyforge. There wasn't really that much to talk about. But we've now had one full uninterrupted year. Happy New Year's Eve, incidentally. So we can talk about Keyforge, what happened this year, and all have a jolly good nostalgic time. So grab yourselves your beverage of choice, settle down, make yourselves comfortable, grab a blanket, and let's have a look at everything that happened, all the big stuff anyway, in 2019 in Keyforge. And it's probably sensible to start off looking at the expansions that were revealed and released. We had two. And one of the interesting things is that we found out here that Keyforge is going right. 2 sets a year, one in May, one in November. So in May, we got the release of Age of Ascension, the second Keyforge set, the first expansion really. And that introduced us to some things. It wasn't a huge departure. Really, what we got was some new keywords. So we got things like deploy, which allows you to put a creature anywhere you like in the battle line. So take something like the Grey Rider, for instance. It's got deploy, you can put it anywhere you like in your battle line, and when you play fight or reap, you may ready and fight with a neighbouring creature. Yeah, we all saw multiple Grey Rider decks that let you attack over and over again during your turn. We also got alpha cards, think something like Glimmer or Sucker Punch, and these were cards that had to be played at the beginning of your doing stuff turn. Once you had played a card, discarded a card, or used a card, you could no longer play an alpha card. And they were generally very powerful. So Sucker Punch let you deal 2 damage to a creature, and if you destroyed them, you archived it. So you couldn't soften a creature up and then Sucker Punch, you had to go straight away. Glimmer let you return a card from your discard pile to your hand, but it didn't let you play a card and then immediately return it. I think they were probably worried about someone playing Key Charge, forging a key, dropping Glimmer, and then doing it again because they had enough amber to do so. But we also saw Omega cards. And really, for me, Dusk Witch is the one that jumps out. Dusk Witch is an Omega card, which is to say that when you play it, your turn ends. You don't get to play any more cards, use any more cards, discard any more cards. It's the last thing you do. But when Dusk Witch is on the field, all of your creatures enter play ready. Worth pointing out, we did actually have one card, Swindle, which is both an alpha and an omega card. It's the only thing you can do during the doing stuff part of your turn. You still get to forge a key, ready everything, draw 2, got 6 cards in hand, but you don't get to play cards, discard cards, or use cards. Yeah, Swindle still saw an awful lot of play. But that was kind of it. We had a few new keywords, and they were fun. But there wasn't much in Age of Ascension. That's not to say it was a bad set, although the results so far do bear it out as the weakest of the Keyforge sets so far. But it just didn't move the game on all that much. Fun set, lots of good stuff. I will always love Helperbot. And to be fair, one of my very favourite decks is the Sharktooth Mare of True Witch, an Age of Ascension deck. But it didn't do a huge amount to move the game on. Worlds Collide would like you to hold its beer, because Worlds Collide really shook things up, ladies and gentlemen. It introduced a lot. So one of the things it did was it introduced the concept of rage. Not to the world at large, but to the world of Keyforge. So look at something like Ire Staff, for instance. Ire Staff comes in, it's an action on an artifact that enrages a creature and gives them a +1 power counter. When a creature is enraged, they have to be used to fight next, if able, if there's no fighting targets they can reap, and then when they fight, they remove the counter. It introduced Exalting, which can be seen in basically every Saurian Republic creature. Yeah, more on them in a minute. So something like Grimlocker's Ducks, when you play it, you've got to exalt it twice. Exalting is where you take an amber from the common pool and put it onto the creature. It's an 11 power, 2 armor creature with taunt. Yeah, exalting it twice is the price you pay for playing it. And we also saw warding come along. So something like Hapsis, when a creature is destroyed fighting Hapsis, you ward it and draw a card. Warding means that you put a ward counter on a creature, and then the next time they would be damaged, destroyed, or otherwise removed from the game, you remove the ward counter instead, and they stay around. So exalting, angering, warding, these were new mechanics. They were fun. But Worlds Collide went so much further. They introduced the concept of anomalies. So let's take something like the Red Baron. The Red Baron is an anomaly. Now, anomalies can come in any house. They are house agnostic. They do not belong to any house. They do not come in a particular house. They can appear in any house whatsoever. But they also have weird stuff going on. So the Red Baron is clearly a pirate robot thing. Yet it doesn't fit into any house we've had so far. We've not actually seen any house that would fit this, so the Red Baron may well be from some future house. It also says, while your red key is forged, you reap steel and amber. While your opponent's red key is forged, the Red Baron gains elusive. That seems like a new mechanic. But if you really want a new mechanic, let's have a look at Valucanth, that while the tide is high, it cannot be used. What is the tide? We have no idea. They've actually put the tide into the rulebook, saying we don't know what it is, it's a potential future mechanic. So these anomalies bring in potential future mechanics, and Valucanth is clearly from the race of fish people that we know is going to be coming. We've seen it before, but it's not out yet. Future houses, future mechanics coming in any house, that's pretty gosh darned awesome. But of course, the big news from Worlds Collide was that we literally introduced 2 new houses. The Saurian Republic, a bunch of dinosaurs that love exalting, and we saw the Grand Star Alliance, which are, well, they're just a bunch of creatures from all different races coming around together. It's really very cool, led by Captain Val Jericho. And these seem like very good houses. And also, right, the Grand Star Alliance seems to have quite a bit of house cheating. But really, they've just all got their own weapons. There's a whole bunch of special rare blasters that belong to multiple different of the creatures that you can get along with special rares. Worlds Collide really shook things up. And incidentally, it does look like a very good set from the early results. We'll go through results in a moment. So those were the 2 new expansions we got, and there's no kind of promos or any of that with Keyforge. But there were a few other things that came along. So for instance, starting in Worlds Collide, we actually had the premium box revealed and released, which gives you 2 decks just like you would get in a starter set, but now also gives you just a whole bunch of really fancy tokens. We also had the Deluxe Archon deck, which is kind of like a 1-player starter set, which is to say you get a deck and about half the tokens you'd get in a starter set. Kind of cool. I did do a buy list, incidentally, for Keyforge generally. I'll pop a link to that one in the description, along with videos like the top 10 from each set, etc. So you can learn a bit more about anything I'm talking about here. I'll pop a whole bunch of links in the description. We also got some other just cool things. So a leaderboard was started at local leagues where you could actually win alternate art cards. That is to say, you would get a deck, Hawk was the first one, and you would be guaranteed to get Hawk in the deck. It could be multiple copies, it could be 1. But it was an alternate art version of Hawk, and the only place to get the alternate art version of Hawk was to win one of these decks in your monthly leaderboard. We also saw the introduction of vinyl figures coming into local stores, and they introduced a plushie of Fuzzy Gruen, which could be won over at the prize wall when looking and going along to Vault Tours. Not cheap, but awesome. And while we're talking about awesome things, Grand Championship started up, And the interesting thing was that you actually got a special deck for winning a Grand Championship. Think of them like national championships. And the Grand Championship started up, and when you win one, you gain a deck with Grand Champion in the name. They've not been stunning so far, but they're very, very cool. And the only way to get one of these decks is to win a Grand Championship. So in a game where it's impossible to really give out promos like you would in a trading card game, they're certainly doing a pretty good job of figuring all of this stuff out. And while we're talking cool stuff, it is worth mentioning quickly that Game Genic did release a proper line of official accessories, deck boxes and the such. I did an opening and review of all of their products. Again, I'll link that one in the description. But it's worth noting as one of the cooler things that happened during the year. Now, most games do end up banning a couple of cards throughout the year, and there were no bans in Keyforge this year, but we did have a couple of incredibly heavy nerfs. So we had bait and switch. In fact, it was bait and switch and library access, right? And when I did my top 10 cards from Call of the Archons, these were literally 1 and 2. Like, actually the two very, very best ones. Little bit big. Bait and switch, initially, when you played it, you steal an amber. If your opponent's got more than you, you steal an amber. If they've got more than you, you steal an amber. And you keep going until you've got the same amount or one more. Whereas now, you can only steal 2. You steal an amber, if your opponent's still got more than you, you steal another, that's it. Too Much to Protect has become the far better card. Bait and Switch is still a nice card, you can still steal 2 amber, but we got plenty of other stuff like Ronnie Wrist Clocks that can do that. Not a bad card, but nothing like what it was. Now, library access, you play it, and then for the rest of the turn, every time you play a card, you draw a card. The problem is, people would use this when they had a very small deck, or they'd use it with Nepenthe to immediately reuse it, and what they would essentially do is get to the stage where they could draw any number of cards, and they just draw through their deck every turn, and they would just create an unlosable position. Yeah, that was pretty big. So we nerfed it now so it purges. You can play it once, but then it purges. You can't play it over and over again, so that you can draw 4, 5, 6 cards every time you play a card. That, ladies and gentlemen, would be a little bit silly. And we're going to look at Vault Tour results in a moment, but we actually had the Vault Warrior series announced this year. Now again, I've done a video about it. You can learn more about it down there. But the important points are this. It is separate from the usual organized play pyramid, and it's for cash money. You can win money playing Keyforge. Now, I know some people are very unhappy about this, but all I would tell you is this. You don't have to play in them. What I love about the Vault Warrior tournaments is, if you don't want to play in them, don't play in them. You can still go to chain-bound tournaments, primes, grand championships, vault tours. You can just ignore Vault Warrior, pretend it doesn't exist, and go about your day just as if it didn't actually exist. But if you wish, ladies and gentlemen, you can join in the fun and potentially win a lot of money playing Keyforge. That's kind of awesome. But I want to finish having a quick look at the results of Vault Tours. Now let's be clear, this doesn't work like most games. With most games I can go, here are the decks that people chose to make. Can't do that in Keyforge, it's a unique deck game. What I will say is that there are 2 players who each managed to win 2 Vault Tours with the same deck, and that means they're pretty gosh darn good. Now, the most impressive of these, as far as I'm concerned, was a lovely George Cagle, and I can confirm lovely, met him. He won with Gasoline Maximiliano Dungeon Keeper. But this was a deck that had library access pre-errata. Yeah, he then did it post-errata. He won with the same deck after it had received a giant nerf. That's kind of impressive. The other double winner was ADM Inslang the Pink Fraud, piloted by Jakob Nosel, which is probably most well known, it's actually a library access deck as well, but most well known for the double Battle Fleet key abduction combination, whereby you draw an obscene amount of cards, and then use key abduction to forge a key at no cost. And then you win the game because you're forging extra keys out of turn and you're not even having to pay for them. Now, interestingly enough, there are basically 8 decks that have won Archon Vault Tours, where you take your best deck, although 2 of them have done it twice. Now, I'm not counting sealed Vault Tours here purely because it's not terribly fair because you can only use what you've got. The only deck that doesn't have shadows in was George's Gasoline Maximiliano Dungeon Keeper deck. Every other deck, all the other 7, all have shadows in. That is a little bit ridiculous. It is also interesting to note that only one of them actually featured Brobnar. That was Honk the Beneficially Topaz. But similarly, only one of them actually featured Sanctum, that being the Snappy Pariah. Brobnar and Sanctum not seeing a huge amount of love. Shadows is amazing. Of course, Shadows is amazing. What is really interesting to note is that Age of Ascension hasn't won a Vault Tour yet. Not an Archon Vault Tour. Came very close, made the final, hasn't won. What's also super interesting is that there is one Archon Vault Tour that we have had since the release of Worlds Collide at PAX Unplugged, which was won by Justin Lizza piloting Light Tasker Market Sheriff, which is a Worlds Collide deck. So Age of Ascension hasn't managed to win a Vault Tour in over 6 months. Worlds Collide has won the only one since it came out. What that tells us is that Age of Ascension is not doing great, and Worlds Collide has potential, but one Vault Tour is not enough from which to draw a huge amount of conclusions. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was the year in review. That was the 2019 year in Keyforge. Sounds fun, right? It's a lot to be excited about for next year. I'd like to know at this stage your memories. What happened? What did you do? What did you play? What did you enjoy? What was lovely about it? Go nuts in the comment section, but please remember the rules. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at @TheWussy, where we talk Transformers and a whole bunch of other games. And do please consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, and all that good stuff. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wussy Plays.